Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Death Chicks. I'm Misty Lynn, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Patty Burgess. And we have Rick and Beth Olsen with us, who are here as part of our grief series, which will run until Christmas. Rick and Beth lost both their children, and Patty's going to do a bigger introduction for them in a minute. The Death Chicks, we're here because this is what may be the most feared topic people live with and people experience. And we want to talk about it and show everyone that it's a part of life. We can talk about it. We can feel okay about it. And we can learn and begin to deeply understand that when we lose someone, they're not really gone. And this is a nice segue into Rick and Beth's story. So I'll pass it over to you, Patty.
All right. Thanks, Misty. Thanks so much. Yes, this is a really powerful story today. And having read their book, which is We Never Left You, that's the title of the book that Beth and Rick Olsen wrote about the tragic death of their children. And that would be 9-year-old Jessica, who was 9 at the time, 7-year-old Joshua. And they were killed on July 18th, 1999 in an accident involving a drunk driver on a Sunday afternoon. So as Beth and Rick have shared, the question they're often asked is, how do you go on? How do you do it? And they're going to share with us all of that today. This story, though it's heartbreaking, it is also just so full of incredible hope and miracles. And I think one of those big miracles has been that Beth and Rick began to receive messages from their children that told them that they are very much alive and well in the afterlife, and that their healing could begin. So we are so pleased to have you share your story today, Beth and Rick. Welcome, welcome. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Oh, you're so welcome. You know, I think most people, when they hear of something that is tragic and horrific, they would like to have some context. Tell us what was happening on this very, very normal Sunday afternoon for you all.
Well, it was a very normal Sunday afternoon. I had happened to go shopping with some girlfriends. We were in Madison, and so I was gone for the whole weekend. I left on Friday, and Rick was home with the children, and so I had returned on Sunday afternoon, and I had happened to be at the American Girl benefit sale. So I was shopping for all of these dolls, clothing, really neat little trinket for Jessica. She loved the dolls. And so I had a great time with some girlfriends. When I arrived home, it was cute because my kids were so happy. They ran out to see me, and Josh helped me take all of the stuff in. I mean, I had hundreds of dollars worth of things. So he helped me take it all. We put it all into my bedroom, Rick's in the bedroom, put it on the bed. And I was starting to go through the items and deciding what to keep, what to give to gifts. And a certain item, and it was this little chicken, and it happened to be a chicken in the basket. And I said to Joshua at the time, I said, I bought this for my niece Amanda, but I think Jessica would like it. Do you think, Josh, do you think Jessica would like this? And he said, yes, I think she would like the chicken in the basket. So I put it in Jessica's pile of items. So all of a sudden Rick comes in the room and he says, I think we should go to the mall. I need to get some things for fencing. We got this new puppy for the kids, and we need to get a fence up for the dog to keep him a little bit more in line. So we jumped in our family minivan, and we got starting to head over to the Beltway, over to Madison. And as we got to Middleton, we got to a stoplight, and we heard sirens. So the light turned green, but Rick was the driver, and he felt he should see where the police were going since the sirens were coming. And so the two cars in front of us went through the intersection, and we saw the police officer, take a right further away from us. So Rick felt it was fine to go through the intersection. And as he went through the intersection, all of a sudden I heard this huge bang noise, and we spun. The whole minivan spun. I just sat there, and I barely moved. Once I was done spinning, we just spun probably, 100 80 degrees. And I said to the children, and I looked back at them, I said, what was that noise? And that's when I saw that Josh was dead. His neck was broken. And Jessica was out the window. She was hanging out the window. So I looked down. I was fine. I was perfectly fine. Rick was unconscious. He was making noise, though. So there, my worst nightmare happened within a second. And I had to start dealing with this. You have to, there's no other thing you can do. I got out of the car. Right away I said, and someone came up beside me and put their right hand on my shoulder, and he said, I am a doctor and so is my wife. We saw what happened in the intersection and we are here to help you. And I said, Jessica is still alive. Can you help me get her out of the car? I knew Josh was gone. And I don't know how they did that. I just started, walking, I think, around the car, watching you. The police officer had been walking by. He now was holding Rick's neck so that Rick, in case Rick was further injured. And he says, he's alive, he's fine. So you start walking around just going, what the hell am I supposed to do? I mean, this is just like the worst nightmare ever. I kept thinking I have to wake up. I need to wake up. And I wasn't waking up. I would talk to Joshua. And I'd go over by Jessica. So she was laying, they brought her out to the grass area and the doctors were working on her. I did hear what they said about her condition. And I'm not stupid, they said her brain matter was out of her head. But I knew we still had a pulse. So then I prayed for a helicopter. And I just said, we need a helicopter. And I heard a helicopter overhead. And it was dispatched to us, but we didn't use it. We did get in an ambulance and we did go to the hospital. And there we had to say goodbye to Jessica. We had to let her go.
At this point, was Josh, you already knew that Joshua was gone.
I knew his neck was broken, his eyes were open. And that little light in your eye, that little sparkle, it was there. So I knew he was dead.
I can't even imagine, and I guess in some ways the shock, being in shock as I'm sure you were, got you through the ability to call for help, ask for help, understand what was going on. But the question, as you said in your information to us, is that everybody's asked you how, from that point on, did you manage? How do you even describe? Because I'm sure anyone who's watching this who has lost anyone tragically, the going on part seems not even optional.
It's not really an option, but life in your body just kind of takes over. I mean, the police showed up at the hospital to take statements and kind of tell us what happened. We had friends there. They moved us along, and we got ourselves home. We had to have people help us clear stuff off the beds because everything was on the bed. And one of the things is somehow we ended up falling asleep. We didn't take any medication because it just doesn't how we do things. But I think the best way to describe it is the next morning, we woke up and Beth just said, how do we go on? And I said, well, can you make it through the next day? And she said, no. And I said, well, can you make it through the next hour? And she said, no. I said, well, how about next 5 minutes? She said, no, I can't even go on. I said, well, then we'll sit here and we'll just take one breath at a time. Make it through each breath, and then we'll begin to move on. And so we sat there for a little while, and then Beth says, I have to go to the bathroom, but I don't want to. I said, well, then you're going to end up going in the bed if you don't want to get up. But your body just says you have to move on. So, we began to move on in autopilot, but as we began to move through the next few days and weeks, at least I began to suspect that there was more at play here. This, kind of happened for a reason, because you know, that there was the police car that went through the intersection, saw the whole accident in his rearview mirror. There was an ambulance that showed up by us, was en route to somebody else, so they were able to route it to us, which got him there quicker. The husband and wife doctor were the cars across the intersection that saw everything. They were right there. Off-duty police officer was walking by and saw everything and was able to help. The helicopter was en route someplace else. They routed it to us. So pretty much everything Beth asked for showed up or was available at that intersection for her.
So in those moments, when you after you heard the bang, did you have any sense of time? Because I'm gathering, as you're talking about in the aftermath when you were home, the time felt so agonizingly, painfully slow. Yet during that time, did you have any concept of time or what was happening?
I only did because I called my father from the ambulance, you know, and so that is when I realized how much time had gone by and how odd it was on Sunday afternoon, 4:30. But you just kind of, that was the only time that I had really thought about the concept of time and what was taking place.
You know, it's a real testament to life and life force within us that, you know, with all what you were experiencing, your body said, I have to go to the bathroom. And then you attended to that detail. And then the next detail that came, you attended to it. And your body basically kept you moving forward. And I believe whatever was innervating that body, spirit, God, whatever we call it, for you to continue.
It began to, you know, move us forward and have us on autopilot until, you know, it got us to a point that a few days on, the next day we began to see signs that we began to understand were signs from the kids. You know, there was a cardinal that landed on the deck right outside our door, and we sat there for like 15 minutes on the railing, and there's never cardinals that sit there. And we had a couple of days after that, we went to the funeral home. We had to walk into the funeral home to make arrangements for, you know, your children's burial and death, which is, you know, something you never really want to think about. But we walk in the funeral home, and there wasn't anybody there. It was empty, kind of dark, and one person met us at the door and said, you know, I'll let Jim know you're here. And this funeral director comes walking up to us, and he shakes his head and says, "That Josh?" He said, "I don't know about him." He says, "He keeps turning the lights on and off, and he keeps changing the music on my stations." He's like, "I can't get any work done. Can you talk to Josh and let him stop that, let him know to stop that, so I can get some work done?" And we're just awestruck, dumbstruck. We're just looking at each other like, wait, you mean there's a different way to think about things with our kids, that they're not really gone, they're just maybe someplace else? And that was the beginning of us starting to understand that, you know, they're, like we said, like the book says, they never left us. Helped start us on this whole path. And I think the other story that we wanted to relate was the chicken in the basket. And
yes.
Set us to that.
Please.
Before you jump there, I just have a question. And you mentioned that it started to seem as if it was meant to be. And then you also mentioned that there was another way of looking at things. And I'm wondering if before the accident, if you had thought in these ways, if you believed that dead people could communicate with people on Earth, and if you believed that all things happen for a reason. Could you touch on that, please?
We did believe that there was life after death, but you know, until you're really faced with it, you don't think about it and put it in any context. And we did believe that it is possible to communicate or have communication with somebody that has passed on, but it wasn't something that you were capable of. But more so, and I think the fact that a lot of people are, it's not something that they look for. And that's one of the things that when we try to help people with this whole process with grieving is that when your loved ones move on, they begin to send you signs to let you know that they are still okay, that they still love you. But the problem is people aren't open and aware, or even considering the possibility to look for that. If they begin to open their eyes to that and open to that possibility, it makes this whole transition through the grief process much easier, because it's like, wait, I'm getting this sign from this person who I thought was completely gone and I'd never see them again. And for us, that kind of helped that transition.
It's always, when you are born, you do have a day to die. And our bodies are not designed to live 200 or 300 years. So we just have to look at that. People die or cross over, they're now starting their next life. It is the next chapter to their journey. Their body just failed. Their body did not do, but their spirit lives on. So that's where we found strength. That is how we could keep moving on. It's just being introduced to my children as spirits. You saw I got all weepy because it was like opening of a door to us. I mean, just the concept that my children, I was burying my children's bodies, but I didn't have to bury their souls, their spirit. Their spirits were right there, ready to say, hey, we are still very playful. And that's exactly what Josh would have done. He would have played with the music. He would have played with the lights. He was my tinkerer. So we knew that instantly. So, but it was baby steps. It was like, what are you talking about? It just was, the door was just starting to open. So that brings into the chicken in the basket. So that was a Wednesday. This accident happened on Sunday. On Wednesday, we had to take care of the funeral talk with the funeral director and get all of those different things lined up. On Thursday morning, I have a really wonderful friend. Her name is Kathy. She is a medium. And so she agreed to see us on Thursday morning, and the funeral was going to be Thursday afternoon. So Thursday morning, we went to her home, and we sat with her for probably about an hour and just spoke about the accidents. We cried, of course, we did many things, but as we were about to leave, all of a sudden we stood up and she said, wait, the kids are here. And then she always would tilt her head and she would say, no, Josh isn't here, but Jessica is here. And then she said, Josh is at Great America. It's an amusement park. It's like this roller coaster, crazy roller coaster ride place. And she said, and there's no lines in the spirit world at these park. So, Jessica told her a few things, and all of a sudden Kathy asked us, did Jessica like fried chicken? And I'm like, no, I don't make fried chicken. I don't know how. And so then she said, well, Jessica said she wants the chicken in the basket. And so this is Thursday. That was a conversation. You remember I mentioned that earlier. That was Sunday that I had with Josh. Now this is Thursday, so my brain wasn't racking it at first. And so then we were discussing chicken in the biscuit crackers. But then she said, no, Jessica really wants the chicken in the basket. And then it dawned on me what it was.
It's great.
In the basket. And I had to stop and tell Rick and Kathy all about it. And we just cried. We just cried. I said, know that your child is alive, when you thought they were dead.
Jessica didn't know before she died that we had bought that for her. So there's no way that she could know that. So now she's telling us from the afterlife that that's something that she wanted, which she didn't even know that we had to be able to give to her.
So Josh didn't need to be there. He already communicated that with his sister. So revelation. It was awesome, but of course my children are dead, but we had to go to a funeral. So we left. As we were leaving, she said, there will be one more gift for you in the car from your children. So we got in the car and we're like, okay, where's the gift? And there was nothing there until Rick started the automobile. And then our favorite song from the Tarzan movie came on, Two Worlds, One Family. So, that is still one of our favorite songs. And it's very true. We are one family. We're in two different worlds.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Absolutely. It's just so hard to believe, and yet the emotions that were so heightened after this occurred. Again, we talked a little bit earlier before show about opening this doorway, opening the pathway, and it is sad that sometimes we have to wait till loss strikes, tragedy strikes, for this to open. And I think you all are powerful messengers that we really don't have to wait. I wonder how many parents perhaps maybe got those messages, but couldn't decipher them because they weren't open. I'm sure you've spoken with other parents who have gone through this, but have not seen a way through. How do you share with them what might be a way through? Because it's certainly not around.
Right. It's, we chatted about it a little bit. It's unfortunately our culture has this perception about death being finality and being final, and that you're never going to see your kids or your children again. And one of the ways that we kind of related to it, there's a little story we came up with. It's like if I have a friend that tells me, it's a very close friend, I have in contact with him a lot, and we do a lot of things together, but he says he's moving to the other side of the world, and he's moving to a third world country, and they don't really have internet over there and or cell service, and it's very spotty. He said, so I'm still going to be around, but it's just the communication is going to be very limited, and it's only going to be every now and then. So that my friend leaves, and I never see him ever again, but I know he's still there. He's just on the other side of the world. But every now and then I get a text message or a phone call or an email from him just to let him know that he's still here. And this happens when your loved ones move on. It's just, you have to think about them, that they're just kind of on the other side of the world. They're still there. They're going to send you these little messages. And it's a lot of times when we talk to people, it's like, well, I don't know, is that a coincidence, or is it actually a message? And Beth likes to describe it. It's like, it's 50-50. It could be a coincidence or it could be a message. If you choose to believe it's a coincidence, then you're not really opening yourself up to the possibility that your loved ones are moving on or have moved on and are communicating with you. If you look at it from the standpoint of it's a message and they are trying to communicate with me, it's like a skill. The more you use that skill, the better you get at it. The more you look to perceive these messages, the more that you see them. And as they begin to start thinking about it in that different context, it starts to make this whole process of accepting the fact that they're gone and they're not there, that you can touch them every day. It starts to open up the possibilities to make it easier. It begins to give them hope. And I think that's one of the things we've found more than anything else, is that our story has given hope to people, to be able to get through something like that, but also the hope that there is another way to look at it. There is another possibility.
Rather than, the door shutting and we won't see them anymore, but leaving the doors open and watching for those messages from spirit. Now, I've heard them called claydons. I don't know if anyone else has heard that term, but a lot of it, I think, is based on perception and how we perceive death and how we perceive life and that energetic being that we are, and that science proves that energy can't die. It just changes form. And I think that's how you look at death. And I know you bring a little bit of science into your work. Maybe if you want to talk about that, and the work that you're doing now in your lives to help others move forward and change their perception of the finality. Because it really, when we can change our minds and look at things in different ways, we can grow in leaps and bounds and heal and release. And it's such a great opportunity.
And before you jump into your work now, which is fascinating, Rick, I wanted to add to that, Misty. What I find too is that we perceive with these five senses, and we think that's all there is. So, and I would venture to say that Beth and Rick, I know you believe that this other world where your children are is just as real as this one, no less, no more. And you've had that experience. So when we think that this world is real and others might just be coincidence, it really is because we're only sensing with these five senses, but we have so much more than that to sense with. So, I mean, that's what they call intuition, certainly mother's intuition. And we can, as you say, we can develop that. So when we make something more real than another, it's going to always discount what it is we think those messages are. And you know, there's more than one reality. And we know with near-death experiences, as you mentioned, Misty, with out-of-body experiences, that consciousness can exist apart from a body. So, you know, that's been documented and verified with so many folks now. I also wanted to mention that I think that we are starting to come around, because I remember when the first medium that was, you know, ever on TV that I can remember, I guess it was in the 90s, was John Edwards crossing over, and he had to endure a whole lot of stuff just to be out there. And now, you know, every channel pretty much, there's the medium, Long Island medium, there's the Hollywood medium, Monica the medium. You can tell I like these shows. But yeah, I think as a culture, we're starting to say, okay, there's something more, and we're starting to, and I think our pop culture begins to reflect that.
Right. Just a quick side note, it was interesting, we were able to go to a session with John Edwards in a small group setting. There was probably 40 of us, maybe. It was
Wow.
mid-2000s. And what was interesting is everyone that came through, every spirit that came through for that, people that were in that room, they were all children. Everyone was children.
Wow. So, and it was, these people weren't necessarily there because they lost children, or was it, I mean,
no, not necessarily because they lost children, but it was just everyone that came through was children. You know, Jess and Josh came through, and you know, there was, like I said, probably 40 people in the room, and everybody that had some type of reading, it was all around children.
Unbelievable. Well, that was certainly meant to be that
Yes.
day. He was in tune. And I remember him saying something about, he actually sometimes sees people, and sometimes these little kids will come up and bother with them, or like if he's reading a book, he has to look over the book and see somebody's face there saying, come on, you know, like, oh, I have a message to get out. Let's get going.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
Oh, that's great.
He was very sweet, because when we were in the room, he right away he said, we have an accident, there's a J involved. And then we raised our hands, and then he goes, okay, I'm getting another J, so we must be moving on. And I said, no, that's us too. And he literally stopped the reading and just apologized to us. You know, it was just, it was very sweet to my heart. I thought, you know, it just doesn't happen every day that somebody loses all their children. So
that's right. And to be acknowledged like that was, yes, quite sweet.
Definitely. So you can imagine we lost our children in 1999, and we started on this path of talking that they're still alive, and we're going to start going into our healing, that we started going into energy healing. But you can imagine in 1999, some of our friends thought we must have grew 2 heads, and we're just crazy a little bit. That's
an interesting question. Did you get some patronizing kind of look sometime, like, oh, they're still grieving, or they haven't moved on, or did you know, were friends understanding, most of them?
Yes. I mean, we lost friends throughout the process, you know, as we went through this, not only from the standpoint of the fact that we lost children, and that people don't know how to relate to somebody who's gone through a tragedy like that, so they just pulled away because they didn't want to face it themselves. But also when we started to talk about the experiences that we were having and the path that we were going on, people began to pull away as well. I mean, we tried the traditional route of healing. We went to many counselors, and they didn't work. You know, and one of my friends, he's still my friend. He's a friend from high school. He's an engineer, very, very smart engineer, and he was trying to tell us that we're being taken advantage of, and this healings that we're going to, and this is impossible. And About a year after the accident, I was at his house and we were doing a little bit of energy work, and his wife looked over and said, "The VCR's on." And he's like, "So it's not a big deal." She said, "It's unplugged. Why would the VCR be on?" I said, "Well, that's Josh." I said, "Josh is here right now." And he had a really hard time understanding that and accepting it, but eventually, with all these different signs that we were able to show him and the experiences that he had that he can't explain, and he tried to apply science. You have to go to the standpoint of, look, if I can't explain them through rational explanations of science, then you need to look at other possibilities, and that's how people begin to slowly come around to that. And you mentioned it earlier, that it's, as a culture, we're beginning to look at that and embrace the possibility that there is more out there.
Absolutely. And did you say he was an engineer?
Very smart engineer, yes.
Yeah, you gotta love those engineers. And when they get on board, boy, they are the biggest supporters. But it's almost like the spirit in some ways has been trained right out of them until it needs to come back. I mean, it's always there. It's just that they don't, again, recognize it.
Right.
I have a couple of engineers in my family, so I know. Especially being in this deaf business. So they're kind of like, she's lost her marbles.
Yes.
So how did you transition from this experience into helping others move forward after great loss?
Well, I would have to say is that going back to the day of the funeral, we actually chose to share the chicken in the basket story with our family members. And at first we were going to keep it just to ourselves. We thought it was a wonderful gift from our children. But then we saw such devastation in our families as they came to the funeral to see these two kids in a coffin. And so we shared it with them. And so then they smiled a little bit. I mean, it definitely eased a little bit of pain, because it is like they were wondering, where is God in all of this? How can this happen to this amazing family? So we started receiving people in the line of the funeral, and as Rick and I were greeting people, I could see my parents and other family members sharing our story. And I kind of stopped, and I hit Rick, and I'm like, they're sharing our story. They're sharing true little present from our children. And I was taken back. And first I was upset, but then I could see that there was a little peace. It was a little smile, a little scratch to the head, because they realized that God is here, Spirit is here, whatever it was, because we all needed a little bit of relief from all the pain. So at that moment, at the funeral, I turned to Rick and I said, we will need to write a book about this someday, because this will help others. Well, 15 years later, I wake up one August day and I said, it's time to write this book. And it took us a year to write the book. And then it's been released. It's been out for about a year. So that is how we have started to help people. But with also trying to get the book out there to help, we've also started a bereavement group, other ways that we could do more for people. I'm working at a hospice center because I view death very differently. And I think I'm also a CNA, so I feel like I can go in there and maybe help people as they're ready to transition, or even their family members transition.
We also found that we began to be put in positions through encounters with people that we had never met before, to be able to tell our story to them so that it would help them. I mean, there's times when seats will change on an airplane and we end up next to somebody, and turns out that person just lost their son or their daughter, a year ago, and they're still grieving and dealing with it. And Beth is able to relay the story and talk to them about it, or those types of encounters began to happen more and more to us, after the funeral and in the couple of years after that. So we saw the power and the impact that our story had, about the chicken in the basket and what happened to us and what we were going through. So we began to realize that impact is what needed to be shared, as well as after the funeral, more and more, we put more and more pieces together about this was not just a random encounter. This was not just a random act of violence that we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. This accident was meant to happen. Our kids were here for the time that they were to put us in a position to be able to help other people. And once, that more and more that set into us and became part of who we are, I mean, we had to begin to help people because it's how we honor our children. It's how we honor who they were, by able to help other people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so many of the most beneficial healers in the world are the people who've lived through it, and people who have come to the understanding that when they are hurt or when horrible things happen, it happens for a reason, and there's always I believe we're all capable of handling whatever is thrown at us, and to make that shift in mind, to accept it and ask, where's the gift here? How can I use what happened to me either to move myself, my family, my community, and others forward? It's a great message.
Yeah. Very powerful, because I have not met. We've, I work in the end of life and hospice industry too, and of course, Misty and I tend to come in contact with folks who have experienced death in varying ways, and I find that you probably are the first folks that I've talked to that said this was meant to happen. That's a pretty powerful statement. When I have met with folks who have lost children, that's not a statement I think that they would even be ready to say after years of healing. So I didn't want that to go unnoticed, because with all the signs and signals that you've gotten, can you say a little bit more about that this was meant to happen? Because I find that really stunning.
Well, when we started to look back at even just the accident itself, was the timing of how everything led up to having everything just happen the way it did. We were starting to leave, and Beth said, "Oh, there's a spot on my shirt. Should we turn around?"
And I was having this talk in my head, so I was thinking, I would like to turn around. We just moved, and so I picked the wrong shirt. There's a spot on my shirt, and I'm thinking I want to go home and change. And then I thought, no, it'll be fine. I was having this banter, this argument almost in my head, because I wanted to go home. But then I'm thinking, no, I should just go. It'll be fine. Nobody will see it. And so that was one of the signs. Also, Rick and I should be dead. The accident reconstructionist said that we both should have died that day. And I know to this day I was encased with angels. I did not move. My head should have been against the window, as Jessica's was. I mean, you don't get hit by 80 miles an hour and be perfectly fine. I had a scratch on my leg. There was nothing else wrong with me.
The timing of the fact that we were the third car at the intersection, and I paused for a couple of seconds to let the police car come through a second earlier or later, and we wouldn't have been there. I mean, all of the help that we already mentioned, that was there. The fact that I was unconscious and Beth was conscious, that way she was able to see from her standpoint. She was able to see that everything that could have been done for the kids was done, so that she had no remorse or guilt. And neither one of us have any guilt about the whole process of what happened. We don't blame each other. One of the things that's funny about the whole thing, ironic, is that as people are coming through the funeral line, they're telling us, "Oh, we hope you stay together." So many people break up after something like this, and there's some statistic of over 90% of couples end up in divorce after an event such as this. But it's not anything that ever crossed our mind. And when we look at the fact that when we started to look at the death certificate for Jessica, when we started to look at it and realize the dates on there and how they lined up with her birthday, there was only one day in her whole life that she could have died, and that was that day.
So if we can explain that, it's always easier if we write it down, but it is in the book. So Jessica's birthday was September 24th, 1989. So 9/24/1989. That was when she was born. Her death date, when you get a death certificate, they tell you how old the person was. She was 9 years, 9 months, and 24 days old. Take the year 1989, the 9th year in the 89, she was 9 years, 9 months, and 24 days old. I mean, that just gives you chills. So I had said to the funeral director, I said, you have her birth date on here. And he said, no, I don't. That is her date, how old she was when she died. So that was a huge thing for me because I'm a numbers person, and that made a lot of sense to me. Also, haven't read the book, don't know that I'm a little bit psychic also. So I used to go around thinking, I knew that I was going to lose Joshua. I always knew it. I knew he was an old soul. And I would tell Rick, I would say, we're not going to be able to keep him forever. He's not ours forever. How do I know that? I don't know. It just was a feeling. And I would say that to my girlfriend. I know I was going to lose Jessica, though. So that was hard for me. But so that's kind of our signs that we felt that you can't ignore all of them once you put them all together.
Right, right. Yeah, and I wonder if that kind of a review is valuable or helpful for parents who can't come to that. I don't know if that would be or not, but you telling the story, perhaps anyone watching may do a review of their particular situation and find some solace in that, because obviously that was there was some solace there for you.
Definitely.
And when we've had bereavement groups, when we've talked with people about it, when we go through some of these signs and we begin to tell them, if you go back and look at the events leading up to the passing of your loved one, you can begin to see that there was coincidences that lined up that were pointing to the fact that they knew they were going to die, and they were beginning to give you signs, and there was other signs that were around there. You know, we had moved a month before the accident from one town to another, about 100 miles away. And, you know, Josh, the last week before we moved, Josh had this strange look on his face. He said, I'm going to miss you. That he wasn't talking about moving from the town we were in, but he was going to miss this world that he was in, because he was beginning to understand that he was going to be passing.
Wow, that's very powerful. Very powerful. Well, thank you for that story and for doing the work you do, helping other people move through and accept and embrace and still love. Absolutely. I am interested to hear a little bit more to how your shamanic journey got started. Well, obviously it got started through this experience, but what made you sort of follow that through, and now, as I understand, you are helping people and conducting healings.
When we tried to look through the conventional path of dealing with grief and nothing was really working for us and it wasn't fitting, one of the counselors suggested, well, there's a gentleman I'm beginning to do some work with, and he does healings through shamanic techniques from Peruvian shamans, and he's holding a weekend workshop, and you guys might want to consider it. So we just decided we might as well, since nothing else seems to be working. So we went out there, and you know, a couple of the experiences we had at the workshop was that it had only been about 6 months since the accident, and he asked if he could demonstrate one of the techniques with on Beth. And then after the weekend was done, he said, I would like to talk with the two of you if you don't mind. So we started talking with him, and he said, you know, your children came to me during the time that I was doing the healing with Beth. And he said, they're not kids. He says, they were 8, 9 feet tall, very strong, very powerful spirits. He said, they're very old. They've been around for a long time. He said, they're here to help you folks. And he began to tell us stuff that we had not explained to him, and there was no way that he could know, and he was getting this information from the kids. And he had invited us to go down to, he was having an expedition to go down to Peru over the turn of the century, because this was 1999, and it would be the Y2K, for those that remember. It was going to be a big deal. People didn't know if the computers were going to stop and everything, and we thought, we need to get away, and we need to get away from everything that's going on, and what a better thing to do than go to a third world country and where nobody really is concerned about it. And for us, it was kind of the beginning of the journey, because it was very nice to be down there at visiting these sacred sites, beginning to have that connection. And the group of people that we were with, they all were of the same mindset of spirituality and what's important. And when we came,
And that there's a spirit world.
and there is a spirit world, and
Our friends thought we were a little crazy.
right. When we came back from that, we decided to continue on with his teaching, with his class, to learn how to become healers, to learn these shamanic techniques and learn how to become healers. And we had an experience. Well, I had an experience out in California. Basically hit with spiritual awakening, and it kind of rewired me on a cellular level, and kind of pointed me in the direction that this is the path you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be a healer. You're supposed to be a shaman. And my abilities from that point on began to improve exponentially. And the traditional ways to being called by a shaman is to get struck by lightning, to go through a very traumatic event, or to have a life-threatening illness and work through it and heal yourself. And we kind of jokingly say, well, I had 2 out of the 3. I'm not going to wait for the 3rd one.
Yes, you did. You did. I know we're coming up to the top of the hour. Are you able to share just a little bit about that story where the lightning with clear skies struck you, and well, I don't know if it struck you, but it came into the room and rewired it? There was a little blip on the audio there, and I wanted to make sure people heard about what that experience was.
We were just practicing doing some sensing some energies on other people in the room, and it was nighttime, 10:30 at night. It was in California. It was clear skies, and from my standpoint, all of a sudden I felt this rush of energy coming where I thought was from this person, and I pulled my hands back.
And from my standpoint, we were sitting, of course, in front of this person, but there was a window up against the wall, and I saw, before all that happened, the rush of him, I believe, I saw the lightning outside. I saw a bolt of light, and I thought right away, oh, it's thundering and lightning. We are from Wisconsin. That's very common here. And then it dawned on me, I'm not in Wisconsin, I'm in California. So I'm like, it doesn't rain in California. So that's when I believe it entered the room, because a light, there were gold, what are they called? Incandescent light bulbs. I mean, it started flickering. One just started flickering. And in the meantime, he pulls off his hands and he starts sweating profusely, and he just starts breathing. He almost sounded like Darth Vader. I mean, he was just breathing very, very strongly. And as the light starts flickering, the person that was teaching with us, she got the instructor over to us, Alberto, and Alberto came over to Rick and started telling him he needed to move. He needed to get that energy moving through his body. If he doesn't move, he will be crippled. And in the meantime, now another light is flickering. More lights were flickering. So
then it was like I was coming out of a stupor. I got up and started stumbling around, and he had me do some movements so that I could get this energy out of me. And every time I moved, it felt just like waves were coming off of me. And then I noticed that all the track lights in the room are starting to strobe on and off. The individual lights are flashing on and off. And as I'm moving around the room, and he had me go outside and ground myself to the earth to try and release more of this energy out of me and through me, to get it to move through me. And throughout that night, then Beth couldn't be near me because of the energy that was coming off of me, because she was pregnant at that time, and she says, "You got to get out of the cabin that we were staying in." I went outside, and it was a hyper awareness. Like I could see animals, I could hear them, I could smell things you couldn't normally smell, and I think I slept for about an hour that night. And the next day, I noticed my abilities to sense and see things were improved, and then 2 days later, the same thing happened again. And we kind of joke about it, saying, "Well, you're not going to wait for the third time on this one either." So,
Right.
That's great. That's great. And so here you are practicing. Who knew there's a shaman in Wisconsin? That's not a sentence that I thought I would ever say, but there you are, and offering loads of help and healing to a good number of people.
I am honored every time I do it, because I'm just amazed at the information I'm able to relay to people and the healing that they get out of it and the effect it has on them. It just continues to reinforce the whole idea to us that the accident happened for a reason. And my kids come in, Jess and Josh come in, and they help with the healings, and they're there to support. And but from my standpoint, I'm able to see them on both. I knew them when they were here, but now I have a relationship with them on the other side.
And I think the other thing we should talk about is that we are spirit and we are energy. So a lot of times something is ailing you, you go to the doctor, you go get a pill, you go take medication to help your body. But who helps your energy body? Who helps your spirit, your soul? There are things that affect you. Even the accident, that impact, when Alberto healed me that day, I laid on the ground, and as the energy left me, I shook. It just shook right out of my hands. So we have to look at it a little bit differently. Not every pill is going to solve every problem. So if we go back to this, shamans have been around for thousands of years, a lot longer than doctors, and they were the medicine people. So that is what Rick can do, is he can help heal that energy body, which then also affects the physical body.
Sure.
Sure. Indeed. And Rick, can you speak briefly about how you work? I know that the shamanic tradition is a bit steeped in mystery, and there's maybe good reason for that. But could you speak briefly about that, and then share how people can find out more?
Sure. From a shamanic perspective, there's an energy body that Beth mentioned that surrounds the physical body, and any ailment, whether it's physical, spiritual, mental, or emotional, can be traced back to a disruption in the energy field. And the shaman's job is to be able to help that individual. They create the sacred space that individual can work in and allow spirit to come in. And the shaman's job is to help that individual to recognize what caused the source of that wounding, and to be able to help clear that disruption from the energy field, and then help them to understand the impact that had in their life in the past, and how it can help them to change as they go forward. So it's not like I'm there as a doctor or a surgeon, taking things and removing things. It's there more to help create that space, hold that space, and to help that person do the work of the soul, which is really the most difficult work to do, which is why we're all here, is to learn and improve our soul.
And I do want to mention, like you said, he does open up sacred space. It is all with good intention and God and spirit, and it is nothing to be scared about, because it is with spirit,
right,
with love.
And we did, when we went through the process of writing the book, we actually created a website as well that has more information about some of our experiences and pictures, throughout everything we went through, from the trip to Peru and our kids. And the website is the same name as the book. It's weneverleftyou.com. And people can get a hold of us through that website. It's probably the best way to do it.
That's terrific. I've been to that website, and it is beautiful. And you will get to really know through pictures a little bit more of your experience. I think this has helped us so much today. And I'd also, before we wrap up, like for you to tell us about your family life now. How does that look? How different is that?
Well, we were blessed, and you will, if people do read the book, that right away I was pregnant with Gabriel. And that is a great story because we did both have a dream to get rid of a chemical in my body. And that chemical was the birth control pills. So the children died July 18th. And by end of August, I was pregnant with Gabriel. Gabriel was born on Mother's Day weekend, which was huge. I wasn't childless on Mother's Day. And so Gabriel is now 16. He is a junior in high school, and he drives. He's quite amazing. And we have Benjamin, who has just turned 15, and he's awesome also. He plays football, basketball, a lot of fun different sports. And then we have Grace. Grace is 11. No, she's just 12. Excuse me, she's 12. And
yeah, don't take off 8 years for her, because I know what it's like when you want to get to be a teenager.
So, and Gracie is in love with volleyball, and she's just a fun, lovely person, and very proud of them.
And one of the things I'd like to add is that we have made a continual process of the children that we have now. They know that they have brothers and sisters. They know that, and we call them their brothers and sisters. They know that they're just in a different form. They're in spirits. They welcome that. We've raised them with the idea and the concept that, we are a complete family, but some of us are in a different place, and they're very accepting of that. And, the more that we can do for children that are coming up to help them to understand this and appreciate and live that perception that there is more to life than just we're here and we're gone. It will help everybody from a grief standpoint, as well as help the world as a whole be able to perceive and live better.
Oh my gosh, so beautifully put. Thank you. This has been just a breathtaking journey for so many reasons. I want to thank you so much. I know you share your story often, but you haven't shared it with us before, and we are absolutely honored. Absolutely honored.
Well, thank you. We're thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Yes, and we're happy there's people like you doing work like this.
Well, we do want to. That's what Misty and I want to get to the general population, and then that is that death may end a life on this plane, but it doesn't end a relationship. And that for me, death is just the other side of the veil. And if we open ourselves to these possibilities, doesn't life here then get so much more rich and enchanting when we can open ourselves to those possibilities?
Yes, definitely.
Well, and that is why we're here. We are here for learning, and we are here to become stronger spirits and learn lessons and help people. I truly believe it's all about helping and love.
You mean we're not here to be looking at our Facebook feed 24/7 and yelling at people that we don't even know, getting in arguments with people about things we don't even know?
Those are distractions, and we all need distractions. But when it all comes down to it, Rick and I would much rather talk like we just did today. Spirituality fuels our souls, and it raises us up. That stuff on Facebook and politics, it just brings us all down. I have to laugh. I think already Spirit and my kids already know who's going to be president. So I'm like, I just put it in their hands because they already know. I think we all think we can micromanage it, and we can't, people. So with that said.
Sweet. Well said. Well said. And
I know.
Maybe we can leave the show with just a blessing and a wish for everyone to open their hearts and invite in the presence of spirit so that we can all be guided a little better and know and feel confident about directions we're taking in life, so that when we come to the end and when we look back, we'll feel like we spent our time here well.
Exactly.
And one last question, and I'm not going to ask who, but we're going to be okay no matter who's president?
They already know, and we are going to be here, definitely.
Okay.
Do you mind if I show the book?
Oh, no, that's what I wanted you to do, because I went to go grab mine. So, yes, please show the book. It's We Never Left You.
I'm trying to see. There we go. And it is available on Amazon if somebody wants to read it, or at Barnes & Noble also. We're so excited. They actually purchased, which is very difficult to do, get into Barnes & Noble. But so we're happy about that. The more people we can help, the better.
Well, you're doing a terrific job. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thanks for the time.
Hopefully we can talk again soon. I think I want to take a shamanic journey to Wisconsin. Another sentence I thought I'd never say.
Come and visit. Yes, we'd love it.
I would love it.
That would be great.
Thanks so
All
much,
right.
you guys.
Take good care.
Thank you.
Beth and Rick Olsen of WeNeverLeftYou.com. Get their book. It will be a page turner, I can guarantee you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.